What's going on, everyone? So, Sidney Prescott, she is going to be the main focus once again in this upcoming Scream film, Scream 7. And look, I am one of the people that really want the Scream franchise to kind of move off of Sidney Prescott. I think, we got her story, we got her arc, right? You got what I think was just perfectly wrapped in a bow, Scream 1 through 3. I even think that they probably should have kind of left her out of Scream 4, but nonetheless, right, that was supposed to start a new trilogy that unfortunately never happened. Wes Craven's passing and all that stuff. But, you got this new pickup. They brought her back at Scream 5. It's like, all right. They establish her living in a different state, different city, right? It's not the New York setting. She's not in New York or anything like that. And, you get to see kind of this new side to Sidney Prescott. You get a little glimpse into it. You don't actually get it, right? You just see her running, walking with her kid. And now this is supposed to be a new film that is supposed to kind of set up and establish Sidney and her family, right? Married to Mark and Kate. She has multiple children. We'll see how they kind of work that out because technically they can essentially frame that any way that they want, right? She could have children in their 20s, right? Like, so that's the benefit that they have. They can kind of make it fit however they want to make it fit if they need to. Now, there is a lot of talk about, the children and Mark not having huge roles in this film, which I think would be a missed opportunity if that's the case. Obviously, take everything with a grain of salt. Everything is just rumor until it's not. But there is a lot of talks about like, hey, like, Sidney, she's the main focus. It's going to be kind of a Gail and Sidney centric style film. The family, yes, they will be in there, but kind of very limited. Which I just think, like at least we need to kind of get the clarity on her and her children and like what's the family dynamic like, right? Like is she, kind of this broken woman that has, all these issues and Mark's, kind of dealing with it and just sympathetic and because it'd be very understandable. I mean, think of all the trauma and with boyfriends and stuff that she's had, right? Is she, she have her guards up still, or is she just completely open to Mark and just, are they just the perfect couple, white picket fence type thing, right? Like there's so many questions. I want to see how is she as a mother? Is she super overprotective? Is she kind of like, hey, like life's too short type thing, right? Like, there's so many different directions in which you can go with this story and this character. But also the question is just the setting, right? There was original thoughts and talks about Sidney and, oh, she's living in Chicago. But then eventually we found out that no, she's actually in Seattle. And lo and behold, the upcoming Scream 7 is supposed to take place in Seattle. Now, again, this is coming from Beyond the Mask. Now, Beyond the Mask, been around for a while, but always take things with a grain of salt. Always take things with, just take it very carefully, right? However, this is one of those rumors that actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because, again, Sidney, we know, lives in Seattle. So if you're going to have a film about Sidney Prescott and her family, you would have that film in the place in which Sidney and her family live. Thus, here is Seattle. So that I fully buy. That I fully think is a real possibility. Also, good thing is that it's not one of those like weird, like, oh, we're going back to Woodsboro again, or we're going back to Hollywood or whatever. Like, now, could this do something where it's like multiple locations, right? Maybe you start in Seattle and then you end up going to maybe she has to return to Woodsboro to stop something. Like, sure, right? Just because, it kind of takes place in Seattle doesn't mean that that's the only location in which you establish, right? I also talked about how I can really see, just kind of based on the rumors and stuff that's going around, that Sidney probably has a safe house, right? Because Sidney's going to be very prepared. Sidney's going to be, she's not one of those people that's just going to be all willy-nilly, like, oh, okay, like, let's just go back home after the killer just tried to kill us, right? Like, you got to imagine that she's probably got a plan, and considering that, like, Mark and the kids are supposed to be in a very limited role, kind of makes sense that, like, they're attacked or whatever, and then Sidney takes the family and drops them off at their safe house, and that no one knows about but like her and Mark, and there you go. That is always a real possibility. Um, but I do like that we are getting a different setting, right? You had Woodsboro several times, right? You had Hollywood, you had New York, right? Now we're going to Seattle. I love that, right? Like, let's keep things fresh. Let's keep and stay in different locations and do stuff, right? Like, not every film has to be in Woodsboro, right? Like, like, I'm okay if they, you're primarily in Seattle and then something happens and she's got to return home or something like that. Like, sure, if you want to do something like that, then fine. But to have an entire, like, what would cause Sidney to go back to Woodsboro, right? Like, what would cause Sidney to want to, have to be in that area, right? It's just like, at some point, it's just like, all right, like, we get it. Enough with the Woodsboro stuff, right? But nonetheless, right, I do think that they have a real opportunity to kind of set up and establish Sidney's daughters, right? So we don't know. We know she at least has 3 children, right? Because she has the one in the stroller she's pushing, and then she says, "Oh, I gotta, get back. I gotta take my girls to school." Plural, 2, right? So we know she at least has 2 girls at home, and then the kid that's in the stroller. Now, again, they could establish and set up however, like, she could have 12 kids for all we know, right? Just because she mentioned those 2, and she could have children in their 20s. I mean, Scream 3 came out in 2000. By the time this film comes out, it's going to be 2025. Also, there's supposed to be a time jump, right? Like, that was one of the talks. So, I mean, she could have a child as old as like 24, 25, realistically. So, they can basically mold it and shape it however they want. But I also think it, yes, it's kind of cliche. Yes, it's kind of silly. Like, if they went the route of, like, carrying the franchise with Sidney, with Sidney's children, you'd also have to probably keep having Sidney in the films, which, again, I'm kind of one of those people that I kind of want to move off of her at some point. And so many people want to see Sidney have a happy ending, but they also want to see her in these films. And it's like, you can't really have both. You don't really get a happy ending if you have to keep taking on Ghostface, right? Like, and then the more films she's in, the more likely it is that they're probably going to have to kill her at some point, right? So it's just like, you got to kind of pick a lane. And so to me, it's like, yeah, you could establish her children, build them up, right? Use this film as like the springboard to get that going, and then kind of carry over with their children. I mean, maybe your daughters don't even call Sidney next time the Ghostface is around because they don't want to bother their mother, right? They want to deal with it themselves, right? Maybe Sidney gets really roughed up in this film and it's bad, right? And their daughter's like, man, like, our mom can't handle something like that again. If something like that happens, like, she might not make it next time, right? Like, there's a million ways you kind of justify it. But it also gives you the door open to keep bringing Sidney back for different little, like, cameo spots or to kind of help at the end or whatever, right? Like, you could do a lot of different things in that regard. So I don't hate that idea. You kind of have it established in Seattle, this film, because there is a lot of talk about them making this like the beginning of a trilogy. Like, okay, fine. If that's the approach and the route you want to go, then cool. So if you're going to really establish this and kind of make this a trilogy, then, you could have, the first film really kind of build, grow, and establish the characters, which you need to do, right? You need good character development. That's kind of something that's been lacking in the last few films, in my opinion, right? I mean, so much so, the consensus was Sam was terrible. They did a much better job in Scream 6, but it was terrible. I mean, Sidney's role in Scream 5 was terrible, right? Like, Dale's role in Scream 6 was terrible. Same thing with Kirby, right? It's just like, it's tough, right? But, if you can give us some good character development, give us some good established characters, right? I do think people would buy into the Sidney's kid dynamic. And, you kind of carry the franchise going forward, create this new trilogy that is kind of built off of Sidney, but it's not, right? Like, it's it's built off of Sidney in the sense of like it's Sidney and her kids, but it's you kind of transition the other way away from Sidney Prescott, right? And now the next Scream, it's her kids are going to college, getting away from mom, and maybe Sidney's having this kind of anxiety, and she's overprotective and all that stuff. I mean, maybe you could even have Sidney in the next film still, and she's kind of like, she ends up showing up at the end, right? Because she hasn't heard from her kid in like a day or two or whatever, or 12 hours or whatever, right? And so she's like overprotective and panics and just goes to her kid and shows up, and Ghostface is there, and it's like, saves the day or something, right? Like, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of attack this and go about it, but I want to keep it fresh, right? I want to keep it exciting. I really like the family dynamic. I really like the idea of setting it in Seattle to kind of tie into the family dynamic, but you also got to have the family involved, right? And if like Mark and the kids are just kind of dropped off and that's it, right? And it's just like Sidney's doing everything. It's just like there's so many questions and things and thoughts and whatnot that need to be answered. And I don't want to just like not answer those, It's definitely a concern. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? One, do you like the setting in Seattle? Do you think like, nah, like it's kind of, you should do it elsewhere? Do you think, would you like it to, maybe it starts in Seattle and then it moves here or there or wherever? Now, again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. Also, what do you think of the Sidney's daughter dynamic? Do you like that idea? Do you not like that idea? Again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe to the channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.